This week on Waterways, Aquarius 2001, Mission 6. The world's oceans present a challenge to mankind comparable to outer space. Scientists for years have been able to look at planets and solar systems through high-powered telescopes, but much of the ocean depths are still unexplored. In fact, we know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the bottom of the sea. Further exploration of the ocean depths is needed. Therefore, NOAA has been utilizing the Aquarius underwater laboratory. On Conch Reef off Key Largo is Aquarius, America's inner space station. In September 2001, researchers from the National Marine Sanctuary System and the University of North Carolina at Wilmington's National Undersea Research Center lived almost 50 feet underwater for 9 days. This partnership program combined training, fieldwork, and several educational activities. The team assembled for this mission included Billy Causey, Superintendent, Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary; Jay Styron, Operations Manager, National Undersea Research Center; Kathy Sakis, Educational Coordinator, Grays Reef National Marine Sanctuary; Laddie Atkins, Executive Director, Reef Environmental Education Foundation; and James B. Lindholm, Science Coordinator, Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary. Along with the intense training to prepare the aquanauts for Aquarius, each had their own underwater mission. Experiments conducted to add information to the unfolding puzzle of our underwater world. In addition, the team interacted with classrooms across the country using live camera feeds from Aquarius. Deployed on a sandy patch at a depth of 63 feet, the Aquarius underwater habitat is 43 feet long and 9 feet in diameter. It is split into 3 compartments. The first is called the wet porch and is essentially a box turned upside down. Like turning a glass upside down in a bucket of water, the air pressure keeps the water from rising. The wet porch acts as the doorway to the marine environment. The second section is called the entry lock. The entry lock is used as a staging area for camera setup and equipment checks, and is the first of the 2 hyperbarically isolated compartments. This isolation means that the section can be individually pressurized or depressurized depending upon the needs of the mission. The last section can also be hyperbarically sealed and is called the main lock. The main lock is the main living area for the aquanauts. It contains a sink, microwave, refrigerator, and a table for meals and desk work. The main lock also houses the main control panels and communications center. At the end of the main lock is the bunk room with 3 beds attached to opposite walls. Because the aquanauts would be confined for 9 days in stressful living conditions, and due to the dangers of living almost 50 feet underwater, each team member had to undergo 5 days of advanced training.
The training was very intense. I'm a dive instructor, and a lot of the skills that we were doing were very similar to what instructors have to go through.
Even seasoned dive instructors would balk at the demands of the Aquarius training. No matter how many years of diving experience an aquanaut has, and even if the aquanaut is an Aquarius veteran, each mission begins with the mandatory training.
First, you have the physical agility. You have to swim 400 yards in less than 12 minutes. That's not too hard for most people, and you have to stay afloat for 30 minutes. And there are several things like that that you have to do.
We did out-of-air drills with our mask off, out-of-air drills, in our sleep, lost buddy procedures. We use reels, similar to a cave diving or wreck diving reel, and did a lot of lost line procedures, again with our mask off, disoriented. So the training was very intense, but it was very good, and it really prepared us well for having a safe mission.
We try to maintain safety as the overriding rule of anything, over science, over operations. If something is not safe, we do not want to do it. We do not want the scientists to do it. We've been running with this program for about 10 years now and have never had a major safety issue.
The number one rule in training the aquanaut is the surface is not an option. The Aquarius missions require a diving method called saturation diving. Jay Styron explains saturation diving.
Saturation diving is when you've been underwater for 12 hours or more. Your body is fully saturated with nitrogen because, as most divers know, the longer you stay down, your body takes up the inert gas nitrogen. So at a certain point, your body is taking up as much as it can, can't hold anymore, so therefore you're saturated. And the human body is about 12 hours.
When a diver becomes saturated, the individual has an overhead environment. Overhead environment is a diving term that means the diver cannot rise above the overhead obstruction. Similar to cave diving or wreck diving, the saturated diver cannot ascend above the obstruction. In this case, however, the overhead environment is invisible to the saturated diver. Even though a saturated aquanaut could see the bottom of a boat, and even though they may be 50 feet from air, the diver cannot rise above the invisible ceiling. The water pressure is not strong enough above the ceiling to keep the nitrogen in the aquanaut's body tissue. Like opening a bottle of soda too quickly, the bubbles would expand faster than the body could release through respiration. When diving to deep depths, a slow, calculated ascent must occur. This is called off-gassing or decompression. A saturated diver could work indefinitely at the depths of the Aquarius habitat, 47 feet, without fear of decompression sickness. Thus, if an aquanaut descended to 57 feet, it would be like diving to a depth of 10 feet from the surface. Therefore, saturation diving offers a huge time advantage over surface diving.
We could dive to 90, 92, 95 feet, even 110 feet for 200 minutes at a time. That's an incredible amount of time to be able to devote to focusing on the job that you have at hand.
The divers can now spend the majority of their time researching their marine environment instead of using up more than half of their time ascending and off-gassing. Another helpful time saver was the air filling stations located around the Aquarius habitat.
1,000 yards either side of the habitat, we have two air sources. We have an adapter on the double tank rig that we can actually plug into underwater and turn some valves inside an air station and fill our tanks underwater. And that really gives us extended time. We can work for 4 hours at a time without returning to the habitat.
You come into the fill station and it's like this dome. You come up in there and plug in and fill up. And it was really awesome to be able to do that. And then you go back out and finish your work.
During the Aquarius mission, my job was to record any crinoids. And I did 7 30-minute surveys and did not see a single crinoid.
Crinoids are a feather star and are related to sea urchins and starfish. In the 1970s and 80s, crinoids were found along the deep reef tract of the Florida Keys from Key Largo through Key West and beyond. Today, this fragile species is largely disappeared from the Keys, but some may be found in the Tortugas. Because the water conditions are better in the Tortugas with less pollution and human impacts, Billy and the others believe that the crinoids may be a good indicator species for overall reef health. The disappearance of crinoids in near-shore waters could be just the beginning of a larger trend.
Had this been in the 70s, we would have seen dozens of crinoids. So I think our baseline for this area is 0. And what we would like to do is to monitor the abundance or disappearance of crinoids over time, either in the Tortugas or the reappearance of crinoids here in the Key Largo area, and see if any changes that we're making in the South Florida Ecosystem Restoration Project or any changes that we're making in ecosystem health by changing the way we deal with our wastewater on shore, our stormwater runoff, if any of these things have a positive effect on our outer reef and the organisms that live there.
Laddie Atkins of Reef Environmental Education Foundation was also counting species. His mission was to count the abundance and diversity of the fish populations on Conch Reef. Adding to the thousands of surveys already accomplished by his organization, Laddie's mission would increase their knowledge on different methodologies of fish counts.
The main focus of my project was in looking at fish assemblages using two different methods. We're using a stationary visual method, which put me in the middle of an imaginary cylinder, and I would record all the fish species as well as the sizes and the exact numbers of those fish that entered that cylinder. Also using the reef roving diver method. So I'd wander around the reef area in the vicinity of my dive buddy, looking under the ledges, up in the water column, recording all of the species I could find and categorizing their abundance. So I used two different methods.
Laddie also compared the use of semi-closed circuit rebreathers in fish counts versus traditional open circuit scuba gear. The hypothesis is that the loud exhale of bubbles from the traditional scuba gear scares away the fish, therefore rendering many fish counts inaccurate. Since rebreathers emit only a fraction of the noise, they have been praised by divers attempting close contact with marine life. However, Laddie has found that while rebreathers definitely allow the diver to get a closer look at the fish, his fish counts were not affected by the rebreathers. Since these and other similar counts were conducted in naturally clear waters, Laddie and other fish counters do not have to be inches from their specimen to identify them. Laddie also hypothesizes that fish in sanctuary no-take zones are used to seeing scuba divers and are therefore not startled by them. James B. Lindholm's mission is a continuation of his work done with Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary. He's been studying the phenomena and implications of social foraging, which is when the feeding activity of one species provides a feeding opportunity for another.
When I talk about social foraging, oftentimes there'll be what we call a focal species, a single species around which social foraging events are formed. Species that are doing some particular behavior that cause other organisms to follow them. A particular example that your average diver in Florida Keys might see is yellow or three-spot goatfish. These goatfish, using their chin barbels, will move along the sand and stir up benthic critters, crustaceans, things embedded in the sand. You'll often see a number of species, yellowtail snapper, a lot of yellowhead wrasse, I've even seen Creole wrasse come down from the water column, and they'll follow immediately behind the goatfish. By doing that, they reduce the amount of time they have to search for prey because they can catch all the organisms mobilized by the goatfish that the goatfish doesn't get.
During his mission, James counted the number of bouts of social foraging. A bout consists of a feeding event where more than one fish noticeably feed together.
By comparing the number of bouts social foraging to the overall diversity in that patch, we can start to say, okay, does the presence of a high rate of social foraging allow there to be more fish in that particular little patch?
My project was surveying the benthic cover, and what I did was take 4 25-meter tape measuring lines, laid those out in a particular site, and then so those were 25 meters long, and every 25 centimeters I would drop a pencil down, and wherever my pencil landed from underneath that 25 centimeter point, I would record what was on the bottom.
The bottom material Kathy found ranged from green and brown algae, sponges, corals, and even sand and silt. Each was duly recorded on her slate.
each line, I would get 100 points of data. So for each site, I would get 400 points of data, and I did 4 sites at 60 feet and 2 sites at 90 feet.
Jay Styron, operations manager, worked double duty. As well as being responsible for the day-to-day operations in Aquarius, Jay spent time in the water tagging fish.
The fish tagging project is mainly to track movements of fish, generally snappers, groupers right now, in and out of the research area, seeing what kind of migration we have, if they're localized around the habitat, if they're spreading out to reefs. We use a fairly high visibility tag that divers can see from about 3 feet away. It's color coded and has letter number system. And I tagged about 36 or 38 fish during my mission, mostly snapper and grouper, a couple of permit, odds and ends fish like that also, just to see if we have a resident population of fish like that around the habitat.
Each Aquarius mission, more fish are tagged, adding to the baseline data. This information is essential to determining the effects no-take zones are having on overall fish populations. If tagged fish are observed in surrounding areas, scientists will have proof that no-take zones are indeed beneficial to outside areas.
Probably the most unique thing about being in the Aquarius was just the amount of time we could spend diving. We could spend out doing our work. We were able to dive up to 9 hours a day at the depths we were in. And that is a tremendous amount of dive time. The ability to do that amount of work was very, very unique and very satisfying.
A veteran of many research cruises where half the time is lost to bad weather or technical problems. And here we came out, and over an 8-day mission, I spent 7 complete days of diving, more than 7 hours a day of diving, and I collected probably 3 times the amount of stuff I would have been able to do had I just been diving from the surface. In addition to just the sheer amount of time underwater to conduct X number of social foraging censuses, you're also in the water for a whole bunch of qualitative observations that you don't get when you're surface diving. When you dive from the surface, you're busy getting down, getting to your site, collecting your data, getting back to the surface. When you're swimming back and forth to Aquarius, you have all kinds of time to observe things.
I saw some extremely exciting things on this mission. I saw a number of species that have not been reported in our data of over 7,000 surveys in the Florida Keys. A red cornet fish. Actually, in our entire database from all of the Caribbean of over 30,000 surveys, it's only been reported once from Bonaire. And I saw it on 2 different surveys out here. Also a 3-line basslet, which hasn't been reported from the Keys before. And we saw a couple other species that have only been reported a few times. And I think the amount of bottom time we had, continuous bottom time, we had really enabled us to make some of these sightings.
My dive partner, Kathy Sakis, and myself started noticing right away large schools of fish. The first thing that we noticed was a large school of gray angelfish, 60 to 80 individual fish in a huge school. And anyone that knows much about gray angelfish know that you see 1 or 2 swimming around, or you may see a half a dozen here and there. But we saw this very large migrating school of gray angels. Shortly after that, we saw a huge school of hogfish swim by. And they were all in about the same size class. And they were not just poking around and sort of meandering. They were moving from point A to point B very rapidly.
Billy and the Aquanauts also witnessed enormous gray snapper aggregates. Since it was months after spawning season, a time known for schooling fish, each scientist took note of these unusual occurrences.
So the Aquarius habitat gives us an enormous amount of opportunity to observe, record, and document in a leisurely way, and to really focus on recording the information and then getting back to a dry space to where you can write it down, absorb what you've learned or observed, and also discuss it with your colleagues.
The aquanauts had completed their 8 days on Aquarius, and their last day would be spent in decompression, or deco for short. This process acclimates the aquanauts to the surface pressure and eliminates the excess nitrogen from their blood. The first step in this process is to attach an exhaust hose from Aquarius to the ocean surface. The pressure in the habitat is slowly released over 16 hours and 18 minutes. This gradual change enables the expanding nitrogen to be eliminated through respiration from the aquanaut's body. Next, the divers crowd into the entry lock. The entry lock is sealed from the main lock and the pressure is slowly dropped, creating an environment equal in pressure to that surrounding Aquarius. Then the divers gear up and head out the wet porch for the final ascent to the surface.
When we came back to the surface for the first time, I was very curious after spending over a week underwater surrounded by fish, what it was going to be like to pop to the surface and take that first breath and see the sunlight and feel the breeze. And as I looked around the horizon, aside from the other divers on the boat, I didn't see another living thing within eyesight. Underwater, we were completely surrounded by living organisms all around us all the time. And to come to the surface and have this huge, vast amount of space and not see anything out there, swimming around or flying, or, it struck me that the ocean is so rich, but it's also so delicate. And a lot of people look at the surface of the ocean and they just don't see that.
With notebooks crammed with data and videotapes filled with images, the Aquarius team achieved unparalleled success in just 2 weeks. The information collected will be a tremendous boon for all ongoing studies. Billy Causey, superintendent of the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, found additional benefits during the Aquarius mission.
It's a true team-building experience when you can spend time with people that you know something about but not entirely intimate things about, and spend the time with them underwater, getting to know them and getting to have this feeling of camaraderie. It's the ultimate in team building. It's the ultimate in being able to get something done in a very productive way, but also dreaming and thinking about the future.
There is no question that these aquanauts are dreamers, but the work that they are doing with the help of laboratories like Aquarius is very real. The Aquarius program gives these experts a better understanding of our changing oceans and coral reefs by giving them unlimited bottom time, enabling them to live among the life they study.